Really? We're out of gas.
So, what do we do now? I'm sorry I didn't believe you.
Can I ask you something? I want you to be my girl.
No!
You want to watch? This makes it official.
Oh, Alan!
But there's something I have to tell you. I'm not like all the other guys.
I know.
No, I mean, I'm really not like the other guys. Go away!
Hold all takeoffs. I know it. 508 reports. Bring it straight in.
Can we get out of here?
Spend all meals.
I'm really enjoying this.
Well, I can't watch.
All night. How about you, Johnny? Okay. Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking. I want the best available map of this. The man knows that bank inside and out.
Darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize your neighborhood. And whosoever shall be found without the soul for getting down must stand and face the hounds of hell and rot inside a corpse's shell. The foulest stench is in the air, the funk of 40,000 years, and grisly ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom. And though you fight to stay alive, your body starts to shiver, for no mere mortal can resist the evil of the thriller.
the problem? Come on. Let me take you home.
Well, what a perfect start to the evening. Hello, everyone. Ruthie, family, friends, Senator West, Mayor Ross, special guests, President Cowley, Provost Brown, students and alumni, colleagues, and all the members of our community. Thank you for coming tonight to celebrate the life of our friend, our colleague, Dr. Alan Sachs. Alan was beloved by people from across North Texas and beyond. And I think as you've already seen this evening, he was a special mix of polite and irreverent. How many of us had Alan say, thank you very much, and maybe another, thank you very much, thrown in for good measure? I think you'll find that the program tonight represents all of these facets of the wonderful and irreplaceable Dr. Alan Sachs. We are going to begin tonight hearing from our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Tamara Brown. Dr. Brown is approaching her 2-year anniversary at UTA, and in her tenure, she has put success of our students at the center of our collective work. And that is a value that Alan shared as well. Please help me welcome Dr. Brown.
Well, I don't even know how you follow that. I'm not certain, someone will have to fact check me, but I think this is probably the first celebration of life or memorial service to begin with a parody of Michael Jackson videos showing a political science professor transforming into a chicken. I think this is a first, and maybe even a last opportunity. What a great sense of humor. What a great showman, and what a great character, and what a great philanthropist Alan was. Alan will rightly be remembered for so many things, and we saw a lot of those depictions, not just in the video, but in the pictures that were playing at the beginning. But one of the things that he will be well remembered for is his generosity, his spirit of giving, his desire to make things better and improve this university, the city, and even the region. You can have a meal at Alan Sachs Park. You can plant flowers in the Salvation Army Alan Sachs Garden. You can even take your garbage to the city landfill via the Alan Sachs Parkway. And I read that Alan particularly loved the humor in that. You may have listened to music on the Brock Sachs Great Lawn at Levitt Pavilion, or received free of charge services at the Alan Sachs Dental Clinic at Mission Arlington. He gave generously to Theater Arlington, to the Humane Society of North Texas, to the Arlington Life Shelter, and at a groundbreaking ceremony for the River Legacy Nature Center, which was another passion of Alan's. There's a photo, I think we actually saw it on the screen. It's a photo of him amidst a group of city luminaries. And most of the men wearing ties, the women dressed in skirts or slacks. I mean, everyone looks professional. Well, almost everyone. Alan is dressed as Forrest the Squirrel, the mascot for the Nature Center. He also provided financial support to UTA students through the Alan Sachs Students with Disabilities Scholarship Fund and the Alan Sachs Health-Related Scholarship Program. Think for a moment about how much Alan helped people or made life better through those gifts. And even if that's all Alan did or all Alan accomplished, I mean, what a legacy. But of course, that isn't all that he did, and it's not all that he accomplished. It was a soft touch and a loud laughter. He was somewhat both a UTA cheerleader and one of its brightest stars, a maverick who lived large and was simply unforgettable. And let it not be forgotten what a singularly outstanding professor Dr. Allen Sachs truly was. One way to measure to take measure of his career is to recite his accomplishments. He earned and received the UT System Regents Teaching Award, the National Society of Leadership and Success Excellence in Teaching Award, the Award for Outstanding Teaching in the College of Liberal Arts, the Chancellor's Council Award for Teaching, and I could go on, and the list certainly does go on. But an even better measure of his career is to look at the impact that he made on our students here. That's harder to account for and yet undoubtedly more important. There's a student who took his class in the early 1980s and ran into him at a grocery store 3 decades later, and Allen remembered her name. Another former student who went on to be a teacher recalled Allen's great trust in others and the impression that he left. He was known to pass out exams and then leave the room because he believed people were fundamentally honest and that maverick students wouldn't cheat. Among the hundreds of former students who shared their memories of Allen after his passing, there were a number who said they audited his classes or would just show up to hear him speak. One of them called it an honor to do that, just hear him speak. Imagine that. His unique lectures, sometimes shocking, often funny, but always interesting, packed our largest lecture halls. Some ended up over capacity, even in an auditorium. And probably that's because unregistered students would sneak in just to hear him speak, to hear one of his lectures. And there was a substance behind his style as well. He kept students interested and engaged and often inspired them and occasionally coerced them to get active in their communities. The great Tilly Bergen, longtime head of Mission Arlington, recalled how he would require his students to volunteer there. Others recounted volunteering at River Legacy for extra credit. Over 54 years, he taught generations of students, literally. He was a one-man bridge to the community, doing more than perhaps anyone to make the University of Texas at Arlington truly of Arlington. My condolences to Ruthie and to the entire UT Arlington community. Without question, Allen is a maverick legend. And for my portion of today's celebration, I want to give Allen the last word, which I suspect he would have liked. He said, "Today's students can be great if someone good leads them in correct directions." Allen, thank you for pointing the way for 54 years. And now I'd like to invite our president, Dr. Jennifer Cowley, to come up and share memories of Allen with us.
Thank you, Provost Brown. Dr. Sachs was beloved by the UTA community, and he certainly loved UTA and the city of Arlington. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Sachs last year, and I asked him what was one of his favorite memories of UTA. And he had no doubt it was the Thriller video. He said, "You need to look it up. It was a viral success before viral was a thing." So of course I went up home and I looked at it and I thought, you know what? He was not a cinematic arts professor. He was not a theater professor, but it just, was his spirit and the way he created humor and connected with his students. A few years ago, UTA Magazine did a story about Dr. Sachs and solicited a call for memories of his classes. And we were flooded with responses. They would talk about how they would rearrange their schedules just so they could take a class with him, how he was always generous with his time with our students, how his quirky lectures left strong memories. And he talked about how, one student talked about how he started one class stating that he wanted to be like Lady Gaga. I want to hear the rest of that story. I'm not sure where Dr. Sachs was taking that, but I'm sure there was an important point connected to political science there. And that was Alan. He was an exceptional teacher, a champion for UTA, and a generous and humble human being. Provost Brown shared some of his philanthropic impact, but my personal favorite was discovered by my son, who is a student here at UTA. He said, "Mom, do you really raise money for pencil sharpeners?" And I said, "Why, yes, indeed, we do." He had found the Alan Sachs pencil sharpener in University Hall. And when last year Dr. Sachs called and said, "What would it take to name a creek?" We're like, let's figure it out. So the city of Arlington and UTA worked together, and we now have the Alan Sachs Creek. And I am delighted every time I'm traveling across this region and I come across something that Dr. Sachs has named. We know that he is leaving his imprint on this community through his philanthropic acts. He has been an absolute treasure to this university and community and will be greatly missed. I know if he could see all of us here smiling, he would be smiling alongside us. A generous spirit like Dr. Sachs is very rare indeed, and I know we are all better for having known him. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you, President Cowley. Our next remembrance, Dr. Victoria Farrar-Myers, exemplifies so much of what Alan valued and what he fostered in others: commitment to excellence, service, investment in community. A former colleague of 16 years of mine in the Department of Political Science, Victoria went on to serve the city of Arlington as city councilwoman for 6 years. Since then, she's founded and serves as executive director of the Nexus Center for Civic Engagement and Leadership. Victoria has been asked by Alan's wife, Ruthie, to deliver the eulogy this evening. Please welcome Dr. Victoria Farrar-Myers.
I'm already over-prepared because I don't have my little pencil with my scrap of paper. If anyone knows Alan, that's how he would start any speech. He would write down a few little things on a scrap of paper he'd rip off, and he'd bring it in with his pencil, but here's my go. To say Alan was a friend, a colleague, a philanthropist, a media talking head, a provocateur, a teacher, a mentor, a scholar, would be using titles. But all of us here know that Alan would just say, "Call me Alan." As you just saw in the Thriller video, Alan showed his personality in the classroom with a lot of flair. It made me smile thinking back to hearing Thriller streaming out of 108 University Hall and knowing it must be student evaluation day. Yes, that's when it was played. When I once asked him why this choice on that day, he would simply say, "I'm leaving them wanting more." My first day at UT Arlington, I found myself with the privilege of having my office next door to Alan. He knocked on my door and he said, "Oh, so sorry to bother you. I just wanted to wish you luck." I quipped back at him, and you know what? I need someone to help teach me about my new hometown. And he eagerly said, "I'm on it." Little did I know this began daily discussions of people, trivia, and did you know, conversations about Arlington. Often in the afternoon, he would pop into my office between classes and dropping off Meals on Wheels deliveries to come in and tell me something interesting anecdote that he remembered about Arlington. Of course, I was to not tell anyone that he just stopped at Brahms and picked up his favorite milkshake that he would enjoy while he talked to me. He took my request seriously, and what he proudly referred to as became my Arlington mentor. He began writing much of this down, which later turned into his Politics of Arlington book, an achievement that he absolutely brought him joy. He was tickled when I asked him to autograph my copy. It took him a whole day to think about what he really wanted to inscribe. You know, up to the very last time I visited with Alan, his ability to recall people, facts, and stories with the precision that belied the joker and sometimes over-the-top outlandish persona that many only knew him for. You see, as a child with polio, he spent a lot of time sitting in the window, observing the outside world. And because of this, he became an excellent people watcher, and he used his powers of observation to read a room once he got there. And you know what he used to say, once I get revved up, he never quite knew what was going to come out next. This often was evidenced in many community talks that I used to go on with him. In the beginning, we used to have this traveling tour where it was me and Alan. Of course, it was Dr. Sachs and his little lady, but that was okay. We had some great times there, although I did realize that if he drove, we'd get there about, 3 hours later, so it probably behooved me to. Anyone knows 30 was his top speed. A student had to take a government class, which she was not thrilled about, but everyone told her to take Alan. Now, many might be thinking it's just because of the prospect of an easy A, and I'm not really going to fight you on that one. But this student found Alan's provocative statements thought-provoking and turned these Saxisms into shorthorn cartoons and later a book. You saw that up in the pictures if you were watching. The student thought Alan's class was more than a sum of these statements, but made her critically think in new ways about the world. And every class for her was an adventure where you never knew quite what the conversation would lead. One of the statements she captured in her comic book was the following little cartoon that Alan said one day in class. Nobody cares when you're born, and no one cares when you die. I found this particular one perfectly resonated with how Alan lived his life in the moment, wanting to be seen and heard from, wanting to elevate others, and making people's lives better, even the furry ones. This goes a long way in explaining why Alan collected named artists and spent years paying them off, to only worry that they might be stolen from his apartment, so he found their homes and donated them. He also explains why giving away money after his mom's passage became a lifelong habit, even leading him to take a second job teaching classes at TCC Southeast so he could pay off all the pledges he made. His only request was that his name be used. Now, not all the time, but most. He took a lot of ribbing for this aspect, but for Alan, it was his way of showing his actions mattered. Alan was being seen. Alan was being celebrated for Alan. And in that moment, he mattered. And for all the moments after, he mattered. Alan loved animals, particularly dogs. You saw Biscuit, a lot of pictures of Biscuit. He'd rescue some, and even one day he was proud of himself that he rescued a dog right off the road. Something about the way dogs love unconditionally, and somehow that unconditional love made the world just a bit better. Although I'm not sure he would appreciate me taking the sunny side view of that one. I know each of us have a particular moment that defines what Alan means to us. For Alan had a knack of making you feel seen. For me, years ago, when I faced my own health challenge, Alan reached out and shared stories of his own illness, made me laugh, and reminded me there will be a next. Somehow, though, through this journey, we transcended the Arlington mentor relationship, and he became not just a colleague, but a dear friend. And when life took another turn and I moved on from UTA, we never let go. Anyone who knows Alan knows that he hated to hug. He would stiffen, and if you were lucky, begrudgingly, he may take it. Kind of stiffened. The last time I saw Alan, I told him, "All right, get ready, I'm coming in for a hug." This time he didn't stiffen. When I commented, he said, "I kind of like that, but please don't tell anyone, because I'll deny it I ever told you." Preparing for today, I watched tapes, read articles, looked at old photos, and visited with his love of his life, Ruthie. We shared stories, laughed and cried, and although I did promise her this evening would be nothing but joyous, and a celebration of a life well lived, Ruthie shared with me a story I think that summarizes an image I want to leave you with today. Allen Sachs Park is close to the home they share, and it has a milkweed planted there to help foster the environment for monarch butterflies to thrive, something Allen cared deeply about. In the last weeks of his life, a neighbor was raising monarch butterflies and came by to explain the 3 stages of life to Allen. He was tickled because she said, "This butterfly, this one right here, when it emerges and we let it go in your park, it will be the Allen Sachs monarch butterfly." And of course, Allen thought this was a great idea, because who wouldn't want a butterfly named after you? I stopped by that park this week, and I sat near the milkweed to reflect on the words I wanted to share here tonight. And all of a sudden, a butterfly flew between the milkweeds. It made me smile, knowing that something so precious, so delicate, so small, and yet so resilient, who would be only with us for a short period of time, but would give us so much joy, so much laughter, and so much beauty. I ask you tonight, when you're out and about and happen to see a butterfly, remember Allen and the gift he gave to us. An exemplar of a life lived out loud, a life who elevated others, one mindful to concentrate on who is in front of you, and really seeing and living in the here and now.
Thank you, Dr. Farmers. Victoria, you've painted such a beautiful and accurate picture of Allen. I think we all know, probably before tonight, but certainly after what you've seen so far, exactly how well known Allen was. Any political scientist working at UTA has had this experience. You're out in the world, political scientist out in the wild, and you're having conversation and somebody says to you, "So what do you do?" And I say, "I'm a political scientist." "Where do you work?" "Oh, at UTA." The very, very next statement is, "Oh, you must know Allen Sachs." Our first remembrance from the larger group comes from a former student of Allen's who made Allen very, very proud. We're glad to welcome Texas State Senator Royce West.
Ruthie, thank you very much for allowing me to be here with you this evening. You know, I attended UT Arlington back in the 70s, and I came here on a football scholarship to play football, and ultimately decided that I didn't want to be a football player, but I wanted to serve the student body. So ultimately, I became president of the student body. And my relationship with Allen Sachs grew in terms of discussions about what to do here on campus, in terms of issues important to students. I recall at the time that students were placed in a hazardous situation crossing Cooper Street. So the question became, what do we do about that? Well, had conversations with Alan, and ultimately we decided to block all the traffic, Mayor Ross, on Cooper Street at 7 o'clock in the morning. I got called to the principal's office, the president's office about that. But we got the attention of the administration, and ultimately that issue was resolved. Alan was a person where you could listen to him, and he's been described appropriately by every person up here, Dr. Myers. Intense as relates to his commitment to making certain that young people here on this campus were able to think for themselves and helping to develop their skill set as it relates to politics. There's several of us here this evening that had a great friendship with Alan. I can recall as a state senator calling him about different issues that I was confronting down in Austin, seeking his advice, wisdom, and also guidance. You see, this giant of a man, his spirit, his work is inextricably intertwined with UT Arlington. He'll be remembered for his generosity, lessons learned by students that he taught, his humor, and his love for this university, this city, this state. So I would ask that all of us stand up and give Alan Sachs a standing ovation for a life well lived.
Thank you, Senator. The next remembrance is from someone who knows firsthand the impact that Alan had on Arlington, the Dream City, the Mayor of Arlington, Jim Ross.
How in the world did y'all pick me to go after everybody else? Alan would have got a kick out of me trying to come up with something that somebody hasn't said already about him. I came to Arlington in January of 1983 and became a police officer here in Arlington, and my first exposure to Dr. Sachs was on our public access TV channel. I think it was channel 13. He had his little show. Y'all remember that? He had his little show, and I remember this was in the 80s, and I was captivated by this guy, and I remember thinking, how in the hell is he keeping my attention so long? He just had a way about him that when you sat down with him, when you watched him, when you saw the Thriller episode up here, you couldn't take your attention away from him. He wrote this book, Politics of Arlington. And I remember when I ran for mayor thinking, what are Arlington politics really all about? One of the first places you go to is the Alan Sachs book. What was unique about the book was Arlington is a different kind of place when it comes to politics. We don't put up with nastiness. We don't put up with the behind the back stuff. And Alan recognized that from long ago. And he wasn't the type of person that would talk the talk in one way and walk the walk in another way. He was just as straightforward and honest and fun as he could be. So what kind of an impact did he have on Arlington? Look at the people around you. Alan touched everybody's lives. He kept us engaged. He made our lives better. And it sounds a little goofy, but he just did. I never spoke with him without feeling like when I walked away from him, I was better than when it was a few minutes ago when I came up to him. So he was demonstrative of how in Arlington we are truly better together. I couldn't think of a soul he didn't like. Ruthie, you may know better than I'm sure you would, but I could never envision him having a lack of tolerance for anybody, even though when you see the cartoons he says, "I hate humans," or whatever it was. He loved everybody. So thank you for allowing me to come up and say a few words. But Alan, thank you for making this American Dream City what it is today. He led the way with how he dealt with people. So God bless y'all. God bless you, Ruthie. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. The mayor's comments remind me of the time when he convened a small group of us to celebrate the council's declaration of Alan Sachs Day. And you saw one of the pictures there with the commendation. And Alan, or I think maybe it was you, Ruthie, asked us to go around the room and share how did we know him and what did he mean to you. So we thought it would be the most fitting tribute for those of you all in the audience who wish to come to the microphones at the front of each of the aisles and share how did you know Alan and what did he mean to you.
Actually, actually, I'm going to get over here next to Alan. This is his ashes. Ruthie called me last night and asked me, yesterday actually, gave me a little bit of a warning and said, could you say, I said, well, I'm not going to, I did too many stories I know. I've known him since 1969. We worked at UTA together. I was a professor, came in 1969 to the graduate school of social work, and I ended up a full professor, left about 15 years later. And then we did that little show, Mayor, with Tony Arangio. And Victoria, this is what happens when you're with Alan. They forget you, correct? Yes. Yeah, it was called Double Talk. Alan took 90% of what he said seriously, and I took 10% of what he said seriously. So Ruthie had shared with me her idea. When we talked a while back after his passing, she said, he doesn't want anything big at all. He just doesn't. He really doesn't. And I said, well, I know why. She said, well, I don't really know why. I said, well, he's not going to be there. I mean, what the hell does he care? Yeah, if I'm not going to be there, being the star, you know. Well, anyway, she pulled two articles. One was 1988. I think the other was 1994. So they're separate. I picked them up, and I looked at them. They're about old age, and they're about funerals. So these are his words, not mine. So how do you know if you're growing old? One of the ways is when someone tells you some dumb Forrest Gumpism, like, you're only as old as you think. Age is only in your mind. Well, old age is not only in your mind. It's in other body parts too, like the prostate gland, or the flab that hangs from under your upper arm, or the drainage troughs that used to be tiny little character lines under your eyes. Old age is apparent, especially in men, when hair starts growing from orifices that are supposed to be as hairless as a baby's backside. Hair sprouting from in and out around the ear is an especially visible clue to the onset of old age. And I can't bring myself to write about the other places. Funerals are held for the benefit of the living, not the dead. We want to say goodbye in a way that will make us feel better. There's nothing we can do to make the dead feel better. Back home in Oklahoma City, there's a family cemetery plot. Every time I go out there to help bury one of my relatives, I look at the graves and realize that probably I will be buried only several feet away from where I stand. But I'm going to try to not let that happen. I do not believe that my relatives want me there, and I know I don't. So here is my funeral request. I want my ashes quietly taken to the Arlington landfill. Ashes. I'm not strong enough to describe the process whereby I will become ash. This choice piece of property has a scenic road leading to it. It is possible that the landfill will be used in future years as a source of methane gas. Just imagine, I may be around to heat your home. I do not want a funeral service because I do not want to be embarrassed in death as in life. Only a few would come to my funeral. Instead of beautiful flower arrangements, there would be poison ivy. The funeral sermon would be the only one in history where bad things would be said, and I can't risk it. I have this strange thought that I'll be on my deathbed, probably in Arlington Memorial Hospital, and down the hall, I'll hear a nurse cry out, "We've got it. The perfect youth pill has been discovered." But I'll have expired before it can be any use to me. But as that great philosopher Woody Allen once said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens." You got the last word, guy. What Ruthie really wanted me to do with this was to encourage people, and as we have with the other speakers, that there's lighthearted moments, and he's gone, but he's not gone. We all hear him. We all see him. We all hear him in our souls, and would like for those of you to feel maybe with this little introduction, if you will, of levity, maybe you could come up and feel okay about coming up. You won't be embarrassed. You will not be embarrassing yourselves. Come on up.
I'm Charles Wade. For 23 years, I was pastor of the church that you could see the steeple when you walked in. The first time I ever noticed that was this evening. I came here when I was 35 years old, and Alan was 36. And we met in a conversation group. And I found out that Alan was from Oklahoma, just like I am from Oklahoma. He went to the University of Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma Baptist University. We didn't know each other until I arrived here, and he'd been here, as you heard, a few years and had already become known as an amazing professor. Students crowded into his classroom. He was unique in the most wonderful way. And I treasured his friendship. Art Digby was pastor of the First Christian Church back in those days. And he was working on a degree at Bright to get a D-Min degree. And his project was to gather people together and have a discussion. And so each month we would meet. There would be professors and preachers and community activists and anybody else that he wanted to invite, and we all would gather. There were about 20 of us, and no subject was off, off limits. We could talk about anything, and we did. And we had professor of philosophy here, and Alan in political science. In those days, he was a radical Democrat. He changed a lot, and it was okay. But it was good to have a Democrat around because there were so few of them around here. So Alan had this curiosity and insatiable desire to be involved and to make friends and to interact with all of us. We were very different. The Methodist pastor was there, the Presbyterian pastor was there, I was there, and then all the professors and the community leaders. And Mayor, what you said about his love for Arlington was evident even then, and his dream for what Arlington could be. And Senator, what he did for you as a student, as you tried to give leadership at a critical time in the life of the school, he was, as we've heard all evening, he was incredibly involved. Everything mattered to him. And, you know, he was not a Christian. He grew up in a Jewish family, and it gave him, you know, as often happens, a kind of comedic gift, a wry way of looking at life as he observed what was going on around him. He was big on seeing hypocrisy, but he was also honest enough to admit that everybody is a hypocrite at times. So we had all kinds of conversations. No one has quite said it yet. I thought it maybe would have been said, but one time in an article, but before he wrote it, he told me that his hope for immortality was in getting his name on as many things as he could. And he was serious about it. And that's why the road to the city dump, I love that. You know, I'm the kind of guy who actually stands in my window and watches when the trash trucks come by. And used to, we had men who were helping, you know, stack it in there. And I would always be quick to say thank you to those guys. Because you imagine what a city would be like if we didn't have sanitation. Well, Alan understood that. And it was, in some ways, a metaphor about life and about how you negotiated through the mess and how you created new spaces. And he had really strong opinions about what churches ought to do. Even though he wasn't a member of one, he was interested in what we were doing. And he really believed that what churches ought to be doing was caring about people. And that's why he loved Mission Arlington so. The last time I saw him in public, Ruthie, you came to a Mission Arlington Christmas banquet, and he talked to all the men and women who work in Mission Arlington. And he thanked them and congratulated them. But there was something else that Alan knew, and that is, it's good to feed the body. It's good to take care of the homeless, and he was instrumental in getting the Arlington Night Shelter started. But it's also good to feed the soul. He loved art. And one day he called me, and he wanted to know if our church would be happy to have an art collection that he was thinking about purchasing. He had discovered a Jewish artist, Edna Hibel, who does amazing watercolors. She lived to be 98 years old, died a few years back. But he had to be one of her best customers. He bought the David Suite, 6 watercolors of the life of David, and we hung it in our church building near the children's area. He gave the same set to First Christian Church, and they hung it on the wall of their sanctuary. He gave another set to Fielder Road, to Grace Lutheran, to First United Methodist, and to the Presbyterian Church downtown. I called all these people to confirm that. And there may have been others that I didn't know about. He wanted to build bridges. He wanted to be a part of all of our lives. From the garbage we discard to the places we worship. To whether young minds learn that to be challenged out of your comfort zone is really critical. He cared about all of that. He was deeply human. And he was my friend. And when Ruthie and I talked about it, she said, he doesn't really want a funeral service. And I said, that's okay. But we've got to do something. Because this isn't just about Alan. This is about us. Having the good sense to take time to remember and to say thank you for what he was as a teacher, professor, as a friend, as a seeker, as a mentor for many. I am honored, and I'm grateful for all I've heard, and I'm honored to have been asked to be a part of it. Ruthie also asked me if I would offer a prayer. And so if you will bow your heads with me, I'd like to do that. Eternal God, strong to save, thank you for giving us life and giving us people to share it with. Thank you for the remarkable creativity you poured into this universe. We live on a planet that so far is absolutely unique. There's nothing quite like it. It's like a gem of blue and green that sails through the universe. And then you filled this land with color and you gave us eyes to see and appreciate. And then you gave us people of all kinds. We're not monotonously the same. And from our perspective, we see things that others don't see, and others see things we don't see. But when we take time to spend time with one another, and when we respect each other, and when we are able to be thankful to you for making us this way, life goes better. It gets better. And we live in gratitude. Thank you for Alan Sachs, for what he meant to our city, and through his students, what he's meant across the state and the nation and to the ends of the earth. Comfort Ruthie in her loss, and may she know that the love we have had for Alan extends to her as well. For all your blessings and for all the people you've brought into our lives, we give thanks this evening. And we do so with gratitude for the way you have loved us and brought us to life and taught us to care for one another. And Lord, I offer my prayer in the name of my Savior, Jesus, who modeled the very things that Alan cared so much about. And they both had Jewish roots. God, thank you for your sense of humor. Amen.
I'm Ken Romer, and when I was a 26-year-old kid and came to UTA in 1971, Alan was one of the first ones to welcome me and make me feel good. Okay, I'll speak up. All right. I want to talk about, and it's going to repeat some things, but with a different angle. Alan as the teacher, Alan as the identifiable giver, and then finally, Alan the preacher. Okay, first the teacher. In 2008, my wife and I gave our sweet little niece to UT Arlington. And I wanted to make sure that in the first semester she would have some really exciting teachers. So I wanted her to have Alan Sachs. And I figured either that would make her want to stay at UTA forever, or she was going to go out screaming and say, I'm never going to sit in this place again. Well, she loved it. And I texted her this morning. And I said, okay, you've always told me that you liked that course with Alan. What did you like about it? Okay, here's what she wrote. We got to arrange debates between state and local candidates. The local candidates were very snarky. They're not always nice to each other, which was strange in 2008. We saw candidates for governor. I met Kinky Freeman. That was really cool. Dr. Sachs was funny, and he was not judgmental of anyone's political beliefs. I'm not sure if I would have become a lawyer without him inspiring me to become more interested in political community. And she is a successful lawyer today, and she mainly focuses on children who have problems in dysfunctional families. So big impact on our family directly. Okay, now Alan Sachs, the identifiable giver. There's been a lot of talk about naming and how he wanted his name on anything. I'll give you an anecdote that I think only my wife and I know. I don't think Ruthie even knows this. I was talking to Alan one day about something that we used to have in Arlington that was wonderful, and that's Creative Arts Theater in School, CATS. It was a theater school, but a dance school. It's produced some professional theater people, lawyers, doctors, teachers. Well, I was talking to him about it, and I really wasn't trying to hit him up for money. But I was saying, they're terrible management there. And I said, if I ever won a big lottery, I would pay the mortgage, and I would pay everything off, all their debts. And then what I would do, I would have in the front of the theater, in great big letters, Alan Sachs Theater. And he loved it. He wanted that. And but he made me promise, and unfortunately, I never won. Okay, the third anecdote, we just heard a very well-known preacher. Well, I want to tell you about another preacher, Dr. Alan Sachs. There was a tradition at UTA, and I don't know if it's still done, and that is they would invite teachers to come to a student group, and they would ask them, what would you say in your very last class? What would you say to your students? And it just so happened that Alan and I were asked to go together. And I came, and I think I memorized the first chapter, no, not the first chapter, the first paragraph of Moby Dick as an entryway to saying that Ishmael was a wonderful example for you to live by, to survive. You know, unfortunately, most of the students hadn't read Moby Dick, so it didn't really make a big deal. And then Alan got up, and he started out with some of his comments about horrible things that we're going to have in the future, and that. But then he gave his sermon. Alan Sachs gave a sermon on the soul. I'm not kidding. The sermon on the soul. Except it was this soul. The soles of your feet. And he went on, and at this particular year, there were a lot of students at UT Arlington who were going around with bare feet. And Alan was really upset about this. So he gave this long, impassioned sermon. You know, the physical things that can happen. If you get a cut, then you're going to get dirt in it. What if it smells and you're in class and you can't get out? You know, he just, this whole, and part it was funny, but I think this was really at the core of Alan Sachs. He really cared tremendously about the physical, the psychological, the intellectual health. And he was really upset about what could happen to these students. And I'm sure the students who attend today remember absolutely nothing about Ishmael. But I think for the rest of their lives, they probably said, you know, maybe I'm not going to walk on cement or at UTA with bare feet. We're never going to get another Alan Sachs. Never going to get another Alan Sachs at UTA or probably any other place, which makes me very sad. But we had him for 54 years, you know? That's wonderful. Thank you, Ruthie. Thank you, Alan.
I'm Tom Dombrowski, and I teach nursing here. I first met Alan Sachs as an undergraduate. He was a guest speaker in a philosophy class, and he argued the proposition that we have a moral duty not to reproduce because there is so much suffering. And then we had to write about this. And I certainly could see his point, but I couldn't accept it. So he got me thinking, and I know I can't remember all the details, but I started out, you know, arguing his side, based it on Gnostic ideas, and then I argued the other side based on Mahayana Buddhist ideas. But he made a big impression, just that one speech, and you know. Then years later, I came back here and I started running into him all the time. by this time I was teaching here. And he always, he really loved healthcare people. And I think that's why a lot of times I'd be in scrubs. So he would just come up to me and, oh yeah, he'd talk to me. And then he would act like he really remembered me. And I guess he really did after a few times. I thought, well, no, he probably doesn't remember me. But now what people have said and everything, I think he probably did remember me. So that made a big impression on me. And that's really what I have to say about him. Again, like everybody says, the world is a lot less because he's here, but we're carrying on the legacy that he left us. And there's a few of my professors that I feel like I'm carrying on their legacy, and in some way, in a very different discipline, I'm carrying on his too.
I'm just one of many of his legacy. I showed up here as a wide-eyed 16-year-old out of a little town. And luckily, this man's one of my first professors. About midway through the semester, he said, whoever's interested, come over to my house. We'll have a little discussion tonight. So got over there, and he had apparently just moved into this house, and not a stick of furniture in the house. And he said, sorry, we'll do the best we can. And one of the students piped up and said, Professor, we're not here for the furniture. We're here for you. You did order pizza, right? So it started me thinking, politically, taking that, changing the way I thought about things. Well, that legacy is always seeming to be passed on. Fast forward 20 years. My son is up here. He's going to school here. And lo and behold, he has managed to get Dr. Sachs for a course. And there is going to be the entire panoply of people running for the elective positions. And he's helping move the chairs up on the stage. And he goes over to Dr. Sachs and he says, which one am I supposed to sit in? And Dr. Sachs looked at him and he said, you're in my class, right? Yes. And my son said, I'm also running for city council. And he just stopped and said, how did I miss that one? You're over there. And my son is still involved in politics. When they had the closing articles from the business press talking about class dismissed, and he said, I'm not sure what my legacy is going to be. Well, we can look at any of the hundreds of signs and things that are named for him. But even more so, it's the tens of thousands of students who have listened to him and learned from him. And that's going to outlast any written legacy we have here. So I just want to say I appreciate that we had this today. And I want to say appreciation to him and everybody associated with him for what they've taught us, the legacy we're going to leave, and a lot of it started with him. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Patty Dew, and hi, Ruthie. Alan Sachs was my buddy. I'm going to be the one that cries. I'm so happy I got to see him on his birthday. Very special. But I have to tell you a funny story. So Alan, of course, is such a wonderful donor and gave to everything. He gave to the Levitt so much. He helped us when we really were barely getting by. I remember he came to the Levitt, we walked around and looked at things, and we were trying to decide what could be named. So we really didn't have that many things that needed to be named. We already had the fountain, and that was about it. So we're walking around, we're walking on the lawn, and he said, I really like this lawn. And I said, oh, Alan, this is expensive. If we did the lawn, it would cost a lot. And I said, what about the seating area? We were going to do it like $25,000 for the seating area. And he was like, I really like this lawn. So eventually we came up with a number for the lawn, which just so happened to be the number that we needed to get new lighting for the Levitt, or the lighting for the Levitt. And we were able to have the Ruthie Brock and Alan Sachs Great Lawn. But the best part about it was every time Alan would come out, we would open up the gates so that he could park really close and they could come and sit and enjoy the concerts. And I loved that, and it just brought me so much joy to see him having so much joy. The entire time he was there, all he would say was, "This is wonderful. This is just wonderful. This is so wonderful." And he would say, "And I want to tell everybody, get off my lawn." Every time. That's all he wanted to do, was get up and tell everybody to get off the lawn, which I thought was just precious. Also, I got to come, and he would let me come and talk about the Levitt concerts both semesters, whenever we would have it in the fall and in the spring. And the best part was just sitting here and watching everybody and watching all the students. I didn't get to have Dr. Sachs when I went to college. I'd already taken it at another university, and when I got here, I didn't get to take it. So it was the most joy I had. Oh, Kathy knows when I would come back from it, I would just be the happiest person in the entire world. Any troubles, any stress, forget about fundraising. It was just all about the joy and being around him. So I adored him. I feel so lucky that he was my friend, and love you, Ruthie.
My name is Dan Dipert. I came to Arlington as a 20-year-old young man to the youth minister at First Baptist Church. There was a family with a bunch of teenagers in our church. The husband was a professor here at the university, and his wife came to me one day and said, "You got to meet this," he had just gotten here, "you got to meet this young, wiry professor we've got at UTA." And Alan and I met at a Denny's out on 360 and clicked immediately. I followed his career. I know he followed mine. He is a mentor of mine. I like my name on things too. What did Alan teach us? We're here tonight. What are we going to leave with? He taught me it's more fun to give it away than it is to make it. He taught me it's harder to give it away than it is to make it. He taught me one thing. I'm going to leave with one thing. He taught me wisdom. Thank you. And Ruthie, thank you. God bless the memory of Alan Sachs. Thank you.
So my name is Ogan Gorel. I'm new to UTA. I came on February 1st, so clearly I missed the possibility of meeting Alan Sachs, an incredible individual, hearing all the tributes. And it might seem a little strange for someone who has never met him to speak at his memorial. It's strange to me, but we are supposed to be Mavericks. But clearly he was a very special person, so I wanted to share my perspective on that. So when I came to UTA on February 1st, I've been here 5.5 months. Every day I've been here, I've been asking myself two questions. Who is Alan Sachs? And why is UTA so special? And I decided to come to this memorial because I wanted to find out who was Alan Sachs, and clearly we are hearing about him in very profound and touching ways. But I also found out the answer to the question, why UTA is so special. So I'll elaborate a little bit on that. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I've been around the world. I've been in Europe. I've worked at universities, research institutes, Asia, obviously in the United States, but UTA is very special. And so, for example, people were talking about the generosity of Alan Sachs, and I feel that generosity here at UTA very deep. He wrote a book about, the mayor mentioned, the politics in Arlington, not the backstabbing, Chicago style or New York style. You get an idea where I've been. And all academic universities have politics, but UTA doesn't have as much as other places. There's a real collaborative, interdisciplinary spirit. So that's Alan Sachs. Also, there's this intensity and kind of caring that I feel here. And I sense that's the spirit of Alan Sachs. And then also the critical thinking also comes from Alan Sachs. So I came to this event and I've learned about Alan Sachs. And I've also had the answer to the question, what makes UTA so special? And I can see that the answer to that is Alan Sachs. My condolences, and thank you for this opportunity to share my learning from Alan Sachs.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Trey Yelverton, an alum and city manager here in Arlington. Got to meet Alan when I came here in 1985 and was one of his students in a class that he could not believe that the coordinating board actually approved. It was a class, I don't remember the name of it, but I remember that it was totally video and documentary only. No test, no reading, no papers. Why would they approve it, he said. But they did, and his point was, you kids don't read anymore, so we're not gonna read. We're just gonna watch TV. And we did, and we watched documentaries, and we watched movies, and then we talked about what the implications were from the messages that were there. Really cool class. I did get that easy A, wherever that came from. But I really appreciated just the different style and approach that he brought, and I'm proud to have been an alum not only of UTA but of Alan Sachs too. I also got to know Alan as kind of a resident. I've worked for the city for 31 years, and back after 9/11 we had some really, really bad budgetary problems. And I also live in the Interlochen neighborhood, where there's a lot of Christmas lights that come through, and there's a cost to that, to the city. We have to pay for traffic control and police officers to run traffic through there. And our city manager at the time decided, hey, tough times, gotta cut it. Gotta cut it. We're not paying for the Interlochen traffic control anymore. Alan Sachs shows up, saves the Interlochen Christmas lights for 2 years. He funded the overtime cost of the police department to the tune of in the $20,000 or so range. And there was a big sign at the entrance that said that it was no longer the Alan Sachs, or maybe it was the Alan Sachs Interlochen Christmas lights. So another way he kind of came out and he literally kind of saved Christmas, you know, if you will. And then one other thing I just want to mention, it was one area that I felt like I let him down, but at the same time, I hopefully helped him out in some ways. After Cowboy Stadium was developed, and Alan really loved art all over the place. You'll see his art contributions all over the place. He really, 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 really wanted something near Cowboy Stadium. He wanted to be associated with Jerry Jones. Trey, how can we figure this out? I've got to do something next to Jerry Jones. He came up with all these ideas, very innovative ideas, and this was one area where I just felt like I couldn't actually ever make it work. Some of you might remember at City Hall, we had this, it was a wooden carved bust, very athletic looking, torso, and he's like, wouldn't the Cowboys really like that? Because it's athletic looking, can't you talk them into putting that in their lobby, at the stadium? I'm like, Alan, I don't think I can't make that work. I did try, and I couldn't make it work. We talked about some other things in the neighborhood, and ultimately we weren't able to do so. So I felt like that was one where I swinged and missed for this. But in another way, kind of helping him out, if you look throughout this building, if you look throughout City Hall, if you look throughout the churches that Reverend Wade talked about, you'll see art on the walls that all have contributed or donated by Alan Sachs. And I didn't know any of that about him originally. He called me up one day and said, there's some art at the Bob Duncan Center. It's 4 Indian heads done by an artist named Leonard Baskin. Very expensive art. And he said, and it's just on the wall in the Duncan Center where there's a lot of kids and there's not a lot of supervision. I'm really worried that art's going to get damaged. Can you help me out? I need to get some cabinetry or something, get it behind glass. So we did that. We got it all fixed up, and if you go down there today and you look for the Baskin Indian head, you'll see it behind some nice glass, protected, and with a note indicating it was donated by Alan. And just all over the place, those art. I always wondered in that conversation, I talked to him, I said, Alan, number one, how do you afford all this art? And number two, how do you know about it? You're a political science professor. How do you understand which artists are the good artists? I don't know. He's got really famous artists that he's gotten proofs and prints from and all that. He said, well, I used to go in downtown Dallas, and he would just socialize and hang out, and there was an art store there, and he befriended the patron of the store, and the guy just kept saying, this is a good one. You should buy this one. This is a good one. He goes, and I couldn't afford it. So they had a layaway plan for him at the art place. And so he would just put aside the ones that he liked, that the guy that recommended, and they would store it away, and he'd pay as he could. And then he would take the art, and then he collected it. And then when he decided it was time, it got donated out to the various places. So he had a secret helper in the art selection process, which helped me understand kind of at least where he got all that wisdom from. But we're so thankful for his contributions across our city, across our neighborhoods, and across our classrooms in Arlington. And thankful to have known him and Ruthie, and blessings to you all.
My name is Mickey Romer. I'm Ken's wife. But I'm here to talk to you about TCC. For many years, I was the district director of student financial aid at Tarrant County, and I was at the South Campus. And I'm here to tell you about a specific donation Alan made that he loved. He had some money, and he wanted to do something for Tarrant County. And he came to me and asked what he could do, and we talked about a short-term loan fund that students could borrow the money that they needed, maybe to help with books, etc. And I told him about something where the way you would work it is we didn't want to charge interest because that takes a lot of trouble to figure it out. So I said, why don't you just charge a quarter? So currently, I believe it's still there, at Tarrant County South Campus, there is the Alan Sachs 2-bit loan fund.
I was very fortunate to have Dr. Sachs during the 2018 to 2019 school year. This was his last year before he retired. I got to take him for not one class, but 2 classes in the political science department. Really enjoyed having him as a professor, but one of the things that I really enjoyed that Dr. Sachs was very unique for was he was a firm believer in what he says. He spoke his mind. It didn't matter whether you agreed or disagreed with him. He was a firm believer in what he believed in. And I feel like that is something that is very important in our society, is people having the courage to speak their minds about what they believe in. And Dr. Sachs, without a doubt, has left an everlasting legacy for many generations to come. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll close us out with my own Alan story. As I was thinking about this, kind of like you, Victoria, just thinking back on the number of years spent with him, I thought, which of the many, many Alan stories do I want to tell? But I think I'll tell two. As you saw in the program, I'm now in the dean's office, but until 2021, I was a professor in the Department of Political Science and actively teaching courses. And as political scientists, we often get contacted by members of the media to give commentary on the events of the day. And Alan was the consummate commentator. If there was a reporter or a microphone, he was happy to visit with them and to share his perspectives. I know that what we now call marketing, messaging, and engagement, MME, it was very, very, very happy to have Alan, because they did not have to work very hard to get someone to comment on fill in the blank, anything. He was happy to give his expertise. But you know, what I find really amazing and reflective of the spirit of the season, of this evening, you would think that when young whippersnappers like Victoria and me came on the scene and reporters started to call us for comment, you know, a different kind of human might have gotten a little, you know, gotten his back up a little bit. But these young whippersnappers were being asked to give commentary, but not Alan. He would come into our office and he would tell us what a good job we did, or he would say, oh, I saw you on TV and it was just perfect. Very, very good. Thank you very much. Very good. And, you know, that's the spirit of the man. And then the second story I'll tell, so from, 2008 to 2021, I was the department chair. Let me tell you, trying to be Alan Sachs's department chair, that was interesting. And I told the Shorthorn when they asked for my comments on Alan's passing, I told them this story, and I'll repeat it here. One of the two most important things as department chair is to make sure that people get their teaching schedules that they want, and to make sure that the copier works. If you can do those two things, then people mostly don't hate you. And with regard to the teaching schedule, I would send out a little grid, and I would say, give me your requests. Can't guarantee that all of them will be met, but I will do my level best if you just turn in your requests. And then the jigsaw puzzle happens, right? You gotta make sure that there's enough courses of different variety offered throughout the course of the academic, of the week, of the schedule, of the different options. You need to make sure there's enough night classes, all of that. Well, this department chair had the added challenge of the Alan effect, which was, I had to be sure that there was a buffer zone around when Alan was gonna teach, because if I had classes, you did not send a young professor to the wolves, which is to say, put her scheduled against Alan, because his section would be full and, you know, hers wouldn't make. But it was true. I had to take into consideration Alan and his enormous draw to make sure that the rest of the classes were filled, because he was just that popular. So I think that I would like you, as you leave tonight, and there's going to be a reception after, that you can mingle a bit. I think I would like to walk through and hear stories of generosity and excellence so high, a bar set so high that you have your own Alan effects. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for sharing your memories. Thank you, Ruthie, for letting us do this. And I wish you a very good evening. And again, I hope you can stay and mingle a bit afterwards. Thank you.